In our world today, when we have a symptom, we run and get a drug to suppress the symptom, but we don't ever go through, oh, what is causing that symptom? What's going on underneath the surface? And what's my body trying to tell me? It's exactly like how we treat our cars, right? So, like, we're driving down the road and we got a check engine light on. We don't just put a band aid over that light. But with our bodies, we're like, oh, we got a headache. Well, let's just take a pain reliever and move on our way. And we don't really think, okay, well, why do I have a headache? Am I dehydrated? Did I eat something that's a food sensitivity? Am I not detoxifying properly? Like, all those questions should be asked anytime we have a symptom.
My guest today is Dr. Heather Stone, and we are talking about her new book, The Thyroid Transformation Blueprint. Please enjoy the conversation. Dr. Heather Stone, welcome to the American Glutton Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I want to say that I'm overweight my whole life, and as a little kid, I would hear about this magical thing that could just, like, sometimes you want to just a diagnosis to explain everything. And the diagnosis I was rooting for my whole life was thyroid. If it could just be my thyroid, that would save everything. And then it never was. And I had all these other paths. But I have seen in my family the way thyroid issues can affect people, specifically women in my life. I have a wife, I have 4 daughters, I have a mother-in-law. I have lots of women who, a few of which have been afflicted with this thyroid thing. And so I can't wait to talk to you about it, because I think that many people have issues with this and aren't even aware of it. And so I want to know what to look for and how to solve this.
Yeah, so the thyroid is interesting, and I feel like it's really oversimplified, and millions of mostly women are dealing with low thyroid, although many men also deal with low thyroid. And it is that story where you have these symptoms, you can't lose weight, you're tired, you're fatigued, you may have depression and anxiety. And you're like, I really think it's low thyroid, because if you ask Dr. Google, that's the first thing that's going to pop up is low thyroid when you put in all of those symptoms. And so many times people go to the doctor and they either get the diagnosis of low thyroid and they say, okay, you have low thyroid. And most of us are like, yes, at least I have an answer. It's not that we want a disease, but we want an answer. And we get told, here, take these thyroid hormones and go on your way, and everything's going to be amazing, which usually it is not. Or you get the story of, it's not your thyroid, so we don't know what else is going on. You're just going to have to kind of live with it. And depending on where you're at and what phase of life you're in, it's either like, oh, this is just what happens when you age. Oh, this is what happens when you go through menopause. And essentially, we just have to live with these symptoms or medicate the symptoms to go away. And ultimately, it's probably not the life that we thought we were going to be living.
Yeah, I mean, that does not sound fun to me. You're tired and lethargic, so you're taking a pill for that. You have this issue or complication, so you're taking a pill for that. And then there's side effects from those pills, so you have more pills. That doesn't sound fun to me at all. I will say I do know a girl who had all those symptoms you just listed, but kept getting results on blood work that was like doctors going, it's not your thyroid. And then finally she did see one doctor who was like, these are not indicative of this is not the only way we can test, and did other tests, found it was thyroid, straightened that out, and her life improved dramatically. I will also say my mother-in-law at one point, after having taken thyroid medication for 50 or 60 years, just decided she didn't want to be medicated anymore. Woke up one day, probably read something on a Facebook group or something, stopped taking her thyroid, and her life fell apart very, very quickly. And then we had to, like, sit her down and go, like, you can't just, this is not the way life works, that you can just stop taking something you've been taking for your entire life and you're in your 80s now. You know, so I guess there's these flip sides. I just got to tell you, I was so desperate for that pill that just would make everything, just straighten everything out. What are the signs to look for? You talked about lethargy, depression, weight gain, not able to take weight off. See, that was the other problem I had, which was if I reduced the food I ate, I lost weight very easily. There was no struggle with that at all. And so my doctors were like, sorry, pal, you don't have a thyroid issue.
Well, yeah, all of those symptoms are true. Like you really cannot lose weight. It is, you have lethargy, you're tired, you may even have chronic fatigue, you have depression, anxiety, your hair starts falling out, you're not sleeping well, whether you can't fall asleep or stay asleep. So those are the classic symptoms, but it's really important to understand, you know, in our system today, in our traditional medical system, everything is separated into parts. And so we think that all of these symptoms are only related to the thyroid and maybe low thyroid hormones. So if we just put in the thyroid hormones, everything's going to be amazing. But underneath the surface, that's really not what's going on, because the thyroid and the thyroid hormones impact every cell in your entire body from head to toe. And the interesting thing you mentioned earlier is that they test your TSH mostly, right? So that's the only test that they really test for and that they only look at. But there are actually 12 different markers that make up a thyroid panel. So you can have a completely normal TSH and your doctor, kind of like your friend, says, oh, your thyroid's fine. There's nothing wrong with your thyroid. But there's over 20 different imbalances or dysfunctions that can happen in the thyroid. And when they're looking at TSH only, that is primary hypothyroid. But you can have an underconversion issue. You can have a pituitary issue. You can have a thyroid binding globulin issue, which means that all of your thyroid hormones are bound up with a protein carrier, but they can't ever bind at the receptor site. So even though your thyroid hormones, your total hormones and your TSH looks good, you're not actually getting the benefit of those thyroid hormones. And one of the most important things that causes low thyroid is almost never checked. Well, I'll say this, 20 years ago when I started doing this and I've had my own thyroid journey, this was never checked for, which is Hashimoto's. It's the number one cause of low thyroid. This is an underlying autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks the thyroid. And the reason they don't usually ever check it is because in traditional medicine, when you look in your toolbox, the only thing that is in there is thyroid hormones. And they're going to just make sure that your thyroid hormones are regulated, but there's not really a solution. It doesn't change treatment if you uncover that you actually have this autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's. And it's 90 to 98% of women who have low thyroid actually have this underlying autoimmune condition, which is why when you just stick in thyroid hormones, it doesn't complete the solution. You still have all of these symptoms. And I will say, when you're dealing with someone who has an autoimmune condition, you have to address all the triggers that are causing the immune system to attack the thyroid. And one of those triggers is low thyroid hormones. So that's why it is actually very important that we have normal thyroid hormones. So those thyroid hormones that your doctor is giving you is actually very important. Right. So going off of it makes everything fall apart, right? And it becomes another trigger to the immune system. So it's a piece of the puzzle, but it isn't the only piece of the puzzle. And it is a small piece of the puzzle, but absolutely necessary.
In a world besieged by unhealthy choices, where fast and ultra-processed foods are omnipresent and dominate society, you can fight back. Introducing the Prep Deck, a radical new tool that turns temptation into healthy choices. This is not a diet, and we realize that this commercial has told you nothing at all about the product itself. Please follow the link below for more information. Yeah. Okay. So my one of my daughters, she's now 18. She got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 4. So that was the first time I had ever heard or thought about autoimmune disease. I had no idea. I think autoimmune disease is so fascinating. The thing that fascinates me more than anything is the prevalence of it in the, quote unquote first world. Like we've got all this stuff figured out, and yet we're swamped with our system. The system that is in place to keep us well and fight off bad stuff is actually attacking us, which is wild. um I know a man and a woman with Hashimoto's, and I've never had a real conversation with them about it because it's not something I've had to deal with myself, and nobody in my family has had to deal with it, but I am interested. I believe both of them are gluten free because of Hashimoto's,
Yep.
which is interesting. Uh, so tell me about Hashimoto's. It is wild, and it affects the thyroid, huh?
Yeah. So there are some people that are estimating that autoimmunity is actually the number one cause of death
Wow.
in the United States. Yes, we get classified as like cardiovascular disease, heart attack, all of the cancer, all of these things. But what's underneath and what's causing that? And there's a lot of people that are estimating that it's autoimmunity that's the real issue here. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of solutions there. But when we're dealing with Hashimoto's, so the immune system is making antibodies to tag the thyroid tissue for destruction. Now, usually this turns on, especially for women, when we have big hormonal shifts. So this will turn on during puberty. It can turn on after the birth of a child, which is the most common time that it turns on. And then we start to see increased symptoms or an increase in the attack of the thyroid as we shift through menopause because we have another shift in hormones. Now, for men, men do get Hashimoto's as well, but men, it's less common. You guys have less big hormonal shifts. However, what I see that turns Hashimoto's on in men is big moments of stress, like where we have like a loss of a job or a bankruptcy or, a death of a family member or something, some big stressful event will cause Hashimoto's to turn on. So, the one thing that's extremely important to understand is that when you have one autoimmune disease, you're at risk for developing multiple autoimmune diseases. And with Hashimoto's, you're at an increased risk of developing thyroid cancer.
Mm.
So it's very important to take the focus off of the thyroid for a moment, right? Because the thyroid is not really the cause of why you're having all these symptoms, but the immune system that's tagging the thyroid tissue for destruction is the real culprit here. So we need to do thorough testing so that we can understand what's triggering the immune system to attack the body. Now, you can substitute type 1 diabetes, you can substitute RA, lupus, any other autoimmune disease for this model, because it doesn't really matter what the immune system is attacking. We have to get the immune system balanced. And in order to do that, you have to find out what's triggering the immune system to create this attack on the body.
That
Right?
can I just say, that what you're saying, I think is so important. I have been thinking a lot about, I think it was Hippocrates who said, treat the patient and not the disease that the patient has. And for me, this is anecdotal and my own experience. For decades, I was treating weight. I
Yeah.
just saw my issue is weight. If I can reduce my weight, I will solve all of life's riddles and mysteries. And that is the problem. And I never was able to be successful. I mean, I could lose weight. The weight would always return every single time, time in, time out, because I was just treating. When I started to consider that weight was a symptom or a byproduct of another issue, which was me, which was an internal thing that was with me. And it's very difficult to talk about because I think people want answers and solutions. And I'm like, this was unique to me and my behaviors. I can describe all of my behaviors, all of my resentments, my insecurities, and all of the things that I work on every day with myself. But I think individuals will have to figure out what it is for them. And maybe it doesn't apply. Maybe weight is their entire problem and it's something like thyroid, right? And so that's a completely different set of circumstances. But
Yeah, I'll say this, weight is just a symptom. And I don't care
I
what
think
anybody
so.
else says, it
Yeah.
is absolutely a symptom. And you have to look at symptoms like your body is just communicating with you to let you know that something is not right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's take weight for an example, because most people with low thyroid struggle with weight, but there's many people that don't have thyroid issues that also struggle with weight. And so you have to figure out, where is that coming from? What's causing that? Right. So it's just a symptom. We can't beat our bodies up and hate our bodies and think that our bodies are working against us, because that's typically what we do when we have weight issues.
Yeah.
I struggled with weight myself. I lost 50 pounds, but it took me about a whole year to lose 50 pounds. And that was about 20 years ago when I actually figured it out. But like when we're dealing with weight in our society, we are told if you just lose the weight, all your problems are going to go away. All your pain's going to go away. All your, your self-esteem is going to go up. Like all the things are going to go away if you just lose the weight. So we're always looking for the quick fix. We're always looking for the 30-day challenge. We're always looking for that magic supplement or magic pill or injection these days.
And then as we lose the weight, we're waiting for that magical click to happen, and it doesn't ever come.
Yes. And when we're done and when we're like, okay, so now I lost the weight, so I don't have to do that anymore. And all the weight comes back on. And we're like, well, what happened? Something must be wrong with me. But in reality, what I find, and this is true for even Hashimoto's or underlying triggers for autoimmunity, is that when we have a blood sugar problem, that's one of the most common causes of why we have a weight problem. Is you have insulin resistance, or you may have a lot of blood sugar variability where your body is producing lots of insulin and your body's storing fat. You can have liver dysfunction. You can have underlying infections. You can have a thyroid problem. You can have mold toxicity and heavy metal toxins and food sensitivities. So all of these things can cause weight gain, but you have to figure out what it is for yourself. And that's just talking about the physical stuff that we can start to implement and do to lose the weight. And then, of course, there's, all of the self-talk and the false beliefs and the things that we have about who we are that also keep us stuck in that cycle.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. I'm a sober person also, and it would be like, I before I got sober, I had terrible liver panels, like really, really awful. And it would be as though in that situation, I just took a pill and was like, well, I'm going to solve this liver panel, and not look at the fact that like, oh, well, I'm drinking myself to point a blackout every day, or doing drugs that are harming my liver. I'm not going to consider that. But then even then, if I just thought about the drugs, well, but also the drugs are a symptom. Like you got to keep going back, because a lot of the things that I identified as the entirety of the problem were symptoms. And it's a real big perspective shift to go, this isn't the problem. This is a symptom. Let me dig a little further and go, what is the problem? What's happening that this symptom is a result of?
Yeah. And I think it's so important that we realize that we are self-healing organisms. Our body is born to heal, right? Like you don't think about your heart beating, and maybe some of us should think about our breathing, but we really don't need to think about our breathing or, all of those things that happen automatically in our body. When we get a cut on our hand, we don't have to run and get stitches. Usually if it's a minor cut, the body's going to heal itself. The body's always working towards survival. The body's always trying to heal and help you survive and have optimal function. But sometimes things get in the way. Sometimes the body is overburdened by, let's say, a toxin, or it can't overcome it. And then you get a symptom. And it's like, hey, something's going on here and I need your help. But in our world today, when we have a symptom, we run and get a drug to suppress the symptom. But we don't ever go through, oh, what is causing that symptom? What's going on underneath the surface? And what's my body trying to tell me? It's exactly like how we treat our cars, right? So, like, we're driving down the road and we got a check engine light on. We don't just put a Band-Aid over that light. Oh, I would really love to do that. Let me tell you, if I could just put a piece of tape over that stupid check engine light. And that's what we do with our health. But we really wouldn't do that with our car, because if we did, we know we would be stranded. So we got to take it in. They got to do a diagnosis. They look for the cause of why the check engine light came on, and they fix the cause of the problem. The light goes off. We're on our merry way. And it was inconvenient.
Yeah.
And it took time out of our day, and we didn't expect it. But now our car's running. But with our bodies, we're like, oh, we got a headache. Well, let's just take a pain reliever and move on our way. And we don't really think, okay, well, why do I have a headache? Am I dehydrated? Did I eat something that's a food sensitivity? Am I not detoxifying properly? Like, all those questions should be asked anytime we have a symptom.
Yeah. Yeah. That is wild. Okay. So back to thyroid and Hashimoto's. What are some of the things, like, is Hashimoto's highly undiagnosed? Or I think that's where you get severe enough that people are having problems that they're seeing doctors about.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's underdiagnosed. And again, it's underdiagnosed because there is no treatment different than thyroid hormones in traditional medicine. But I really do think that's where functional medicine shines, because in functional medicine, we're always looking to find the root cause of why someone has a symptom, or in this case of Hashimoto's. First, yes, we diagnose Hashimoto's. And then secondly, we look for all the different triggers and we do very thorough testing. And so the testing in traditional medicine is limited because they run the test according to the diagnosis that you have and the medication that they can apply. That's the standard of care, and that's kind of the rules that they have to play by. But in functional medicine, we're always looking to figure out what is the cause. Yes, we want to know what the diagnosis is, but we have to do much deeper testing so that we understand where all the issues are. So, yes, a full thyroid panel. But every time we have an insulin surge, like when we eat bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, cookies, cakes, candy, soda, we have an insulin surge, and that insulin surge causes the immune system to attack the thyroid. Not only that, it starts to store fat, because any excess insulin that's left over, it takes any extra sugar and we store it in our cells as fat. And we wonder why we can't lose weight. So that's like one trigger. It's a huge trigger that almost everyone is dealing with, every American is mostly dealing with, but certainly people with autoimmunity. And you talked about your friends who have been diagnosed with Hashimoto's are off of gluten. And this is really important because when our immune systems are over responsive, when we may have leaky gut, your immune system will respond to different foods in ways that it shouldn't. However, gluten is interesting because there is a mechanism called molecular mimicry, where the molecule of gluten looks very similar to the thyroid tissue. And so if your immune system, when you eat gluten, you have a food sensitivity to that, which means that your immune system starts to produce antibodies to the gluten. It also will produce antibodies to the thyroid tissue and to the cerebellum of your brain. That's
so you just get a host of problems from eating gluten.
You just get a whole host of problems. No. And rarely is it a tummy ache. Sometimes you don't even know, but a lot of times it's, yes, you can get a stomach ache, but you get joint pain, you get dizziness, you get extreme fatigue, your hair starts falling out even more. And so it's these symptoms. A lot of people get headaches and they don't realize it. It's the symptoms. A lot of people think having a gluten sensitivity or any kind of food sensitivity, you're going to get a stomach ache, you're going to get diarrhea, you're going to get gas, bloating. And that's what it means to have a sensitivity. But unfortunately, that's not the only symptom. And many times that isn't a symptom at all, but it's an immune response. And a lot of people also misunderstand a sensitivity with an allergy, right? So if someone has a frank allergy to gluten, then you go into anaphylactic shock and you need an EpiPen and all of that stuff. And we think, well, we don't have sensitivities to gluten because I don't have an EpiPen or anything like that. But it's a small, not necessarily small, but it's an immune response that will have different symptoms with different people. And these antibodies stay circulating in your system for 90 days or longer. Wow. With one little bite of gluten, this immune response continues. So you can imagine somebody says, oh, I tried to go gluten-free and it didn't really matter much to me. And I'm like, okay, well, what does gluten-free mean to you? They're like, I did it for 30 days. I'm like, well, you still had those antibodies in. So we have to do it for even longer. And even one little bite of gluten is going to cause these antibodies to stay circulating in your system. So you never truly get the true effects of what it feels like to be gluten-free. So when someone has Hashimoto's, it is imperative that they are gluten-free.
Yeah, I will say, having lived for so long in Los Angeles and seeing the fad diets come and go, there's the cayenne, everybody's drinking cayenne lemonade with maple syrup in it. And that's the diet. That's all you do. You just drink
the lemonade fast.
Yeah. And there was when I was a kid, it was cabbage soup or Fit for Life and all these the Beverly Hills diet. Like, I can't eat pineapple today because of the Beverly Hills diet, which I was put on numerous times. I did grow up and then read a diet in Vogue, which was like, you get a bottle of white wine and a couple hard-boiled eggs a day. And I was like, that's the one
that
diet.
Sounds like an amazing one.
Yeah.
I missed that one somewhere.
If my mom had put me on that at 10 years old, I would have crushed life, But I will say, the kind of advent of the gluten-free craze, where 9 out of 10 people in Los Angeles are going gluten-free. I was not immune to this. I was also gluten-free for quite some time. But again, I expected to go gluten-free and then handle my weight. And I was eating gluten-free pizza and gluten-free chicken wings every night, and nothing was happening. And I was like, why, God? Why not me? But I do think it's like so overblown. Somebody with Hashimoto's, I completely get it. If you've got celiac, yes, you can't eat gluten. But do you think it's become, I don't know where you live. You go to Los Angeles and it's like, I'm shocked that the Krispy Kremes in Los Angeles don't have gluten-free. And I'm like, you guys are poisoning yourself and rationalizing it because it's gluten-free. This doesn't make any sense to me.
So I agree with you on one aspect and not on the other. Okay. So first of all, I do agree that when you go gluten-free, if you just substitute all the bad food that you were eating and now it's gluten-free, you are not doing anybody a service, because I think that, a lot of these gluten-free products actually have more sugar in them than the other products.
And fat. Yeah.
And
loaded.
Fat. And it's like, and bad oil and all of these things. And we think that we're eating healthy. And then you're like, well, I didn't lose any weight and I went gluten-free. I'm like, okay, what does that look like for you? And so when you eat these gluten-free things, you're getting all these insulin surges and your body is storing fat. And then you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm diabetic. I guess the gluten-free thing didn't work. And I think we are, I think we're just substituting bad food for more bad food, or it gives us license to eat bad food because it's gluten-free. And that is absolutely not the way to do it. Yeah. Now, the other thing that you were talking about is gluten-free has become a fad, or kind of like a craze. I was gluten-free 20 years ago, and I actually went to Los Angeles and I asked for something.
You started it. You were like, everybody.
I went, and I'm like, do you have anything that's gluten-free? And they looked at me like I had like 10 heads. And so I learned how to order, and try to navigate through that without anybody really understanding what it was. But I will say this, gluten has changed. So I'm not sure how old you are, but I think we're probably around the same age. And I
feel like I'm older than you, but okay.
Maybe just a little, but I don't know. The cabbage soup diet was a thing when I was trying to lose weight. So in the mid 90s is when the agricultural practices started to change, and they actually changed. We started introducing, Roundup and all of these pesticides and organophosphates so that we could grow wheat and you wouldn't have to deal with all of the weeds. And they dump loads of this on right before harvest so that it harvests all at the same time. And there's all kinds of things that have happened with our wheat here. and it has really become very toxic. And so there is an estimate and studies that are showing that 100% of Americans are sensitive to gluten. And it's not the actual wheat itself. I mean, it is the wheat itself here. But if we went to Europe, we would not really have that big of an issue. I know when I go to Italy, I enjoy some pasta. Do I overdo it? Not really. I try to still, make sure I'm regulating that, because no matter what, wheat and gluten will actually raise your blood sugar. And so over time, that creates weight gain, no matter where you're at. But we don't have the immune responses when we go over to Europe. I was talking to somebody when I was there, and they said, in Europe, they only allow 7 different chemicals to be sprayed on their crops. And over here, it's over 390 something different chemicals and hormones and all kinds of things that they put on the food. So it has become toxic. It is not the same wheat that we had in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And now it's just, how do we grow it bigger, better, faster? And at the cost of at the quality.
Is there something to, and I don't know the specifics, but I do know that my kid and my youngest and I became obsessed with making sourdough. It was probably COVID, but I think it was before I read Michael Pollan's book, I believe, and his recipe for bread was water, salt, flour. And so we got, Bob's Red Mill, ancient grain flour,
Yep.
and we fermented it in our kitchen and we fed it. And it was a science project until it was a loaf of bread that was delicious. But I remember reading something about how the fermentation process, the gluten is actually consuming itself and becoming molecularly different. Is that part of it at all?
It is. And I think it has less gluten, but it still has gluten. And so I think that the jury's out still for me with autoimmunity and with people who have a significant sensitivity where it's going to impact their immune system. But I think if you didn't have an autoimmune condition, that is a much better choice,
right?
Than if you were just eating regular bread. Even better, I import flours from Europe. And so you could do it with that kind of flour, and I would actually make that at home probably.
Yeah. Also, anecdotally, to your point about the changing landscape of agriculture, when I was a kid, I would go to Vermont every summer in the late 70s and early 80s, and we would play these epic games of tag in cornfields. And there you could walk by or drive by a cornfield, and there were these amazing patterns that would emerge based on how they were planted in these gigantic rows. And my kids and I went to Vermont a year ago or 2 years ago, and I looked at the cornfields and I didn't understand what I was looking at. There were no rows. They just looked like gigantic lawns. Like everything was so dense, it would be impossible to walk through. I mean, truly, it was like a jungle of corn. And I had to look at the first one I saw for a few minutes going, what is that? And then I realized, oh, that's corn. And it was so perplexing that it could be planted so close together when in my lifetime, you couldn't do that because the corn itself needed space to retrieve all the minerals out of the earth. It actually had to be planted like a foot away from another corn stalk or the corn wouldn't grow. And now they've figured out a way around that.
Yeah, I think it's always how can we grow more for less cost to feed more people. And also, especially with corn, they've hybridized corn so much that it has a much higher sugar content so that they can make more high fructose corn syrup. And when we eat a stalk of corn, we're thinking, oh my gosh, this is so good for me. But it actually has so much sugar in it that it's really wrecking our blood sugar. And so it is amazing how agricultural practices have changed change over the years. But I will say that there is a big movement for more regenerative farming and rotational cropping, and really looking at the soil and how do we sequester more carbons from the soil, and how do we do cover crops so that the land isn't sitting just barren soil, completely depleting minerals. So there is a big movement. It's not big enough yet, but there is a big movement to start with this more regenerative farming and regenerative agriculture. So we're actually taking care of the earth and improving our food supply. So we've got a really long way to go, but there is quite a big movement, which is awesome.
Yeah. What are some of the things, like, let's say somebody has some of the symptoms you've talked about, has been to their doctor, their GP says, no, your thyroid's fine, but they're still experiencing some of these symptoms. You have a thyroid blueprint, right?
Yes.
What is that? What do you do?
So essentially, there's 7 pillars in the thyroid blueprint. So number 1, you have to have a constant pursuit of your goals. Like, you have to have a goal that you're trying to achieve, and you have to be determined to achieve that goal. And you have to really take ownership of your health, because nobody should care more about your health than you do. So you have to have goals. And number 2 is you have to have complete and thorough testing, right? We've got to really look and say, okay, maybe you don't have a thyroid issue. Maybe your TSH is normal, but the symptoms that you're having is not normal. And maybe you don't have a disease, but there's got to be dysfunction somewhere. And we have to be determined to figure out where that is. So they really need to find a functional medicine practitioner that's willing to do very thorough testing. And then the third pillar is a comprehensive diagnosis and analysis. So it's not enough to say, okay, you've got hypothyroid or you've got prediabetes or diabetes. I mean, I literally taught, when my kids were young, my 5-year-old to learn how to diagnose low thyroid and diabetes. A 5-year-old could do it. But what a 5-year-old can't do is really look at all the different patterns, look at all the physiology and the dysfunction, and figure out, what is going on underneath the surface that's causing these symptoms. And then pillar number 4 is you have to have customized care. No longer, especially with this patient population, it's not enough to give us a label and give a medication. We have to understand what's going on. There are loads of different triggers for the immune issue. And like I said earlier, there's over 20 different patterns that a thyroid can dysfunction. So you have to look at the individual person, and you have to customize care. And then the 5th pillar is that you need a coach, because you need somebody who's been there and done that. You need someone to shorten. After all, time is our most limited resource. And if you could shorten and collapse time by looking for someone who's been able to do it and done it themselves and help many people, then that's going to give you the fastest results, the best results in the shortest amount of time. But the other thing with pillar number 5 is you got to be coachable. You actually have to implement. You actually have to take ownership. You have to take responsibility. And responsibility is simply just the ability to respond. So you take full ownership of your health and in implementing. And then pillars number 6 and 7 is just continuing to test. Okay, look at the data, say, okay, how is my body healing? How do I need to change? Is what I'm doing working? And then you need to continue to customize care until you've reached a point where you're doing amazing. And then when you're doing amazing, the journey is not over. It doesn't mean we get to go back. Your health is a journey, and it doesn't end until the day that you take your last breath. Yeah. So this is a journey that we always have to be looking to optimize health. And you said something earlier that, we are in a healthcare model that's either keeping us sick or making us sick. And I will say that really our model is a sick care model, meaning, and it has a purpose. It's not bad or good. Like, when you're sick, you go to the doctor, and when you need medication, you go get that medication to rescue the body or get it out of an emergency state. But that system is not set up to optimize health. you have to look out of that system if you want to optimize health. If you want to go beyond the diagnosis and a medication and you're like, okay, I don't have any disease, but I don't feel amazing, I'm not optimal, then you've got to look underneath the surface and optimize your physiology instead of just managing a disease.
Yeah, I think there's so many important things there. First, with regard to decisions on my own specific thing, which is, I think all of this is unique to us each and every individual, because
Yes.
there will be factors and nuances that just aren't universal. But with decisions, it started for me with sobriety, where I would wake up, discover that my life was unmanageable, which, the night before while I was doing drugs, it seemed perfectly manageable. And, and then I'm kind of confronted with a lot in the stark light of day and going like, oh, well, that's it. I'm deciding to be sober. That's not enough. That decision, I think of it kind of in terms of like, I am a rock hurtling through space and time, caught in the gravitational well of a black hole. And that black hole is all of my years of behavior and compulsions. And every time I'm doing something, whether cognitively or subconsciously, that creates the patterns of my life, it adds mass to that black hole, which builds its strength. A simple decision to have a different direction is not enough to end the pull of that black hole. I will get pulled right back into my mean, whatever the mean is for me, which would be like the use of drugs and alcohol to avoid discomfort, or what I learned first when I was very young, that I could comfort myself with food.
Yep.
You might have to make that decision every day, multiple times a day, and you might have to back it up with action in order to create new patterns that give you a new direction. So that's like that kind of decision thing, because I wanted it to I made the decision 1,000 times that I was not going to be a drug addict. I made the decision 1,000 times that I was going to lose weight. Often I would lose weight. Often I would spend some days sober, but the pull back into the patterns of my life were so strong that I could almost blink and find myself, without knowingly going back to those behaviors. You talking about a coach, I think it's so valuable to have somebody to talk to who can just allow you to separate yourself from your mind and go, I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to pay attention to what I want. I'm just going to do that thing that they tell me. Because, also today, there's so much conflicting data out there. There's carnivores versus vegans now, which are almost like two religious gangs. You know what I mean? Where it's like, the vegetables are poisoning you. No, it's the meat that's causing cancer. And it's like, you make up your mind to like go down a path, and then halfway through that path, you see an Instagram post which undoes everything. And it's like, stop, turn it all off, find somebody you trust, and see if their system can help you, like do what they say. And if it is, you got to be super honest with yourself about what you want. And if you're making progress, just stick to that. Don't listen to the other nonsense. Those are my two additions, and not even additions, but like expanding upon my experience with what you're talking about, because I think it's all very, very valid.
Yeah. And to talk about what you were saying, it's not enough to just say, okay, I want to lose weight. So there's actually an 80-20 rule. And the 20% is all the stuff we're seeing on Instagram, how we eat, what we need to do, like cold plunge, hot sauna, like carnivore, vegan, all the things that we're supposed to do that we swear and promise we're going to do when we make the decision to lose weight or stop some addiction. And that's where we focus most of our time, on the 20%. But the 80% is what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your subconscious mind that a lot of times we don't really understand or that we're not aware of. We don't even know that there's this game going on with our subconscious mind. And we're literally it was programmed when we were younger, around 5 to 7 years old. We had programs that got put in by our parents, our grandparents, people around us. It's whatever was making us safe. It was kind of creating some rules to live by that keep us safe, keeps you alive, and keeps you away from pain. And so, whatever it is that you programmed in your mind around age 5 to 7, if you haven't replaced that programming, you're still living by that programming today. And so, most people also have false beliefs of, I am not enough. And so, when we don't think that we're enough, we start to cope with drugs, alcohol, food, those types of things. And so I am not enough is probably genetically in all of us on some degree and some level. Anytime you have a ceiling of anything, of health, wealth, spirituality, relationships, that ceiling is usually governed by, I am not enough, or I'm different, or it's not available to me. And that looks different for different people. Like that version of that plays out different words. But if you can spend some time in the 80%, that actually helps you move the boulder very easily. Because if you start with the 20% only, it's like you're moving this boulder uphill and it is extremely hard and it keeps coming right back down. But if we would spend some time on the 80% of things and contemplation and listen to the self-talk and where are those false beliefs and what program are you running, then it's going to be so much easier to move that boulder forward and you continue to get your results build upon each other. And it sounds like you've done a lot of work in that area.
I think to your point, I never thought of that as 80-20. 80-20 for my career of a dieter has meant like if I eat good 80% of the time, 20% of the time I can eat garbage.
Yeah.
And my estimation of 20% has never been accurate. You know, like I would always undo the 80% by leaps and bounds. But I do totally agree that that for me has been the entire game. That is all of it. I know how to lose weight. I can lose weight quite easily. That's not such a problem. So where I wanted thyroid to be the issue, no, I was just searching yet again to avoid this truly uncomfortable work you're talking about. That's the real discomfort. My entire life has been about not being emotionally uncomfortable. That's it. That's all I'm trying to solve, is just to feel better about myself and some sense of control and the void that exists within me of zero self-worth can be filled with substances and food, and then I feel better. It's really weird. It's kind of like the gym, or the opposite of the gym, where I will trade immediate gratification for long-term discomfort every day of the week. Whereas if I just get a little uncomfortable right now, I will be so much more comfortable in the long run, you know? And I wake up every day not wanting to go to the gym, and yet I go and I get uncomfortable at the gym and I feel so much better afterwards. Whereas with drugs and alcohol, I just wanted right now, make me comfortable. I know I'm going to feel so much worse in a few hours or tomorrow morning, but that doesn't matter if I'm comfortable right now. So I've had to really reverse that kind of thinking.
Yeah. So in your subconscious mind, it's always there to keep you away from pain.
Yeah.
So if you are in a painful moment right now, it will reason and rationalize all day long for you to grab the drugs and alcohol to get you out of pain right now. It'll deal with the other pain later, but right now, that's the only thing that's really important. Yeah. And then whenever you start to make changes, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's on the other side of that change. This is really uncomfortable. I'm associating this with pain, so I'm going to avoid the gym at all costs.
Yeah.
So it's like the most bizarre thing. But if you really understand how your brain works, you can start to change the images that you see and the words that you say. And you can start to say, oh my gosh, when I feel sore, sometimes I catch myself when I'm working out. Or when I'm thinking about working out, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be sore tomorrow. And then I'm like, oh, actually, that's my muscles working in that definition that I want. Hello.
Yeah.
So you have to catch yourself and start to reprogram. But it's only being conscious of your thoughts and the what's going on in your head in order to win that game.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that I, for a long time, was sabotaging myself simply with the way I thought of myself,
Yeah.
with the thoughts I was having about myself. And I catch myself now, and I still do it,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Yeah.
final piece to the puzzle, or one of the points you made was there is no finish line, right?
It's
Like
the journey.
that's the other thing, is like I kept waiting for the finish line, and when it didn't come, I was like, well, enough of this. This is really hard. If I can't do this forever, right? Um, and but this was something I figured out so much quicker with drugs and alcohol, and possibly because those were going to kill me quicker. And that might have been the impetus that allowed me to figure it out quicker. But when I treated my issues with substance use, like they were simply acute problems and not chronic problems, they kept coming back.
Yeah.
When I realized that this is a chronic issue I'm going to have, that I have to at least be aware of for the rest of my life, it got so much easier,
Yes.
and it's weird because on the other side of that, prior to really confronting that and existing within that discomfort, the idea that it could be chronic was overwhelming. It was like, no, I cannot deal with this forever. That's not possible. And there is something for me to just welcoming that discomfort, and going like, it's all part of it. And it's how I kind of get through it today, where it's like, my impulse was to avoid, and now I'm like, make me uncomfortable. And then what's is it going to kill me? Is that discomfort going to kill me? No, the drugs might kill me, but that discomfort's not going to kill me. Okay, I welcome it. Let's get uncomfortable.
And I think it's when you get over that first lesson, right? Like when you're like, all right, I'm going to sit in this and I'm going to figure this out. And then you actually will get results. There's no other there's no other thing that could happen as you overcome yourself to one level. And then now I'm always like, okay, where is it? Like I am here. Like, where is it? I'm searching for it. Like I'm not uncomfortable at all, but I need to go deeper. And I'm not going to die from drugs or alcohol. And I've kind of overcome the eating thing. So where is it? Where is that limiting place? And how can I get uncomfortable? And so it almost becomes a different game that you're trying to play. And you almost get, I feel weird when I'm not uncomfortable.
Right. Like what's going on?
What is happening here? Yeah. Something is really weird, but it does get easier. But I know that first step is like overwhelming. And it is almost like this huge, thing that it's hard to even see where to start. But you know what the saying is, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right.
So you just got to start chipping away at this thing called you that we're trying to overcome here.
Yeah. I think it's doubly overwhelming in the face of the marketing of a lot of these fad diets, where it is even just like, don't eat gluten, it'll solve all your problems. You just have an acute gluten problem, right?
Yeah.
I think even that kind of thing, they're get rich quick schemes, but I'm not immune to that. Somebody comes to me and says, buy this Bitcoin today and you'll be able to retire tomorrow. It's very hard for me, if they have a good argument and seem like a smart person, for me to go, well, why wouldn't I do that? That's silly.
Of course. I'm there too.
My problems.
I also buy supplements too. I'm like, oh, what's this thing? This new supplement. I'm like, okay, what are my people watching and listening on? Maybe I should try it out.
Right.
So, and it is, this whole weight issue, especially in America. I forget the exact statistics, but I think Over 70% of Americans are obese, and almost, I think, and 10% of that is severely or morbidly obese. And it's almost socially acceptable, right? Like doing drugs and alcohol is not really socially acceptable. You're going to die. People care about you. You know, that is not okay. And even for you, and your life is going to totally not live a great life that you could have been living. But when we're overweight, it is socially acceptable now because most people are overweight, and most people have this same story that nothing I ever do works. And if I gain weight, I just gain it right back. Or if I lose weight, I just gain it right back. So we get stuck in this societal thing that makes this totally fine and acceptable. And we all complain about it, but we all keep doing the same thing over and over. And until we start to dig a little bit deeper, find the root cause physiologically, but also dig a little bit deeper mentally and emotionally, that problem's not going to be solved.
Yeah, I think what we talked about early on, considering weight a symptom, not the problem, really helped me because you know, it's easy to look back at my old perspectives and the way I viewed the world and go like, yeah, I understand what I was doing then. It makes perfect sense from the point of view that I was operating my life by, right? Today, thank God I was able to shift that. That shift was not easy. That shift was not just like, it wasn't like just make the decision to lose weight. It took years of trying the same diet because I knew that diet would produce weight loss, even though I knew I gained the weight back every single time. Here I go again. This time's going to be different. And you know, I can't say I totally blame people when I hear when I can just recognize my own experience of decades spent going back and forth on diets. And so I'd spend some portion of the year thoroughly miserable, incapable of producing anything because I, you know, when I'd stand up, my vision would go black. I was so calorically depleted, you know, and so just thoroughly depleted and then I would spend the other half of the year gaining the weight back, you know, reverting to all my, and so I don't, you know, when you hear people go like, well, just accept that you are, that the condition you're in is a permanent one and you can't do anything about it. I get it. Like, yeah, I was almost there too, but I do think like if you can change the way you're thinking about it, it can become easier to confront and deal with.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we were talking earlier about finding a coach, and it's not just about finding a coach because, you know, it is also about finding other people who are in your situation that have overcome this condition. It is about not settling for someone who tells you this is just your condition or everything's going to be fine if you just lose weight. I was told that I probably would never have children. And whenever I wanted to get pregnant, just come back and they would help me with fertility. I'm like, really? That's your answer? Like, I'm not going to get pregnant for 10 years, but your answer is you're going to have a problem with that and you're not going to help me with that until I'm ready. And then you're going to just force the body to get pregnant. But I think it's important for you to find other people, which is why it's really important to have a community of like-minded people who are on this journey, who you know are starting to get great results, because there's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. And the reticular activating system is going to look for all different kinds of examples to reinforce your beliefs, right? So a simple way to see how this works is I was going to buy a new car, right? I was going to buy a Chevy Tahoe. I wanted a white one with all black accents. And so I never really saw one. So I went and created it. I customized it. I ordered it, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I'm driving. I'm like, there's that car I just built and bought. And oh my God, there's another one there and another one there. And it's your reticular activating system justifying your purchase. right?
Yeah.
Justifying and telling you that, oh, that was a good purchase. And so it does work for you if you can start to find people that are on your same journey, who are making good results, who are achieving what you want to achieve long term, not a 30-day, here's, a miraculous thing that happened in, 5 days they lost 100 pounds, but like really on your journey, who is really achieving the goals and the lifestyle that you want. And it will help you stick with it. It will
Yeah.
help you reinforce that.
Yeah. Dr. Stone, this has been fantastic. I really, really appreciate you and what you're doing. And thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I've had a blast, and I appreciate you for having me on.
All right. Talk to you later.